We are here for the instant reaction review of WWE SmackDown on the 21st of March 2025. And it was quite an interesting show coming live from Bologna. It felt like, I got to say, for the most part, it felt a bit house showy. And I think this is something we've talked about a little bit already on this European tour. Understandable, right? The audience is excited. They are kind of taking on anything they can get in some ways. And then at the same time, the crew is split over a tour. But I've got to say, it was enjoyable. Got a few comments here coming in already from Aiden. Says it was short because they built it up like it would last about 30 minutes. Referring to the end of the show, of course, we did see the climax there with Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and CM Punk. But it wasn't as long as they kind of made out. I mean, Roman said, look, I'm here for 15, 20 minutes. It probably ended up being 15, 20 minutes, to be honest, but it felt like not a lot happened. It was just like they fought, but I don't know what else they could have done, to be honest. Like, they were going to attack each other, and that's pretty much it. And that's what they did. That was the end of the show. It was, again, overall quite an enjoyable show, but let's start at the very beginning. Let's go back to the start of the evening. It started out with an entrance from Randy Orton. As you would expect, the fans of Bologna are very excited to see him sing along to his theme song. He goes to say something. Kevin Owens comes out straight away. Kevin Owens basically says, look, we should be a tag team again. We should be going after the titles. We got close last time. Look, you're becoming something you don't want to be. You should understand that I've been going for a lot lately, and I've just been attacking people, including you. Sorry about that, but I still hate Cody. But you're fine, and you should understand that more than anyone. Didn't really work, you know. He didn't win over Randy Orton with those kind of comments. Randy Orton basically said, look, I want to punt you. We're not going to be a tag team anymore. And basically said, look, me and you at WrestleMania. Now, it doesn't look like we're going to kind of have to wait much longer for that to be confirmed. They were talking about it on the show as if it was official. Then they said it was. I'm not sure if it actually was. But, I mean, surely this is one of the many matches that we've been able to call for quite some time. I do think this is locked in now for WrestleMania. But, yeah, a quite fun way to start the show. Always good to see, I guess, especially international fans really appreciating Randy Orton and kind of, you know, getting their chance. A lot of these people would have been, you know, growing up as kids, fans of Randy Orton, and this is seeing something that they've always wanted to see live. And, you know, I think you've got to appreciate something like that. And WWE are very wise to take advantage of situations like that as well. So that's how we started the show again. Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, nice way to get things going. Then after that, we got the first match of the night. It was Damian Priest and Jimmy Uso up against Drew McIntyre and Shinsuke Nakamura. I started to think that maybe this is leaning towards a fatal four-way match or something between them at WrestleMania because, I mean, Jimmy and Drew have that kind of crossover. It made sense. Damian and Drew, Nakamura seems a bit shoved in there, but doesn't seem like he's got anything else going on. So I thought maybe a fatal four-way was what we were leading towards. It doesn't look like it now. It looks like it was more about, again, pushing that storyline between Damian and Drew. At the end of it, Drew went wild, beat the crap essentially out of Damian Priest, who had actually picked up the win alongside Jimmy Uso, but Drew didn't want it to look that way. At the end of the show, he essentially took out Damian Priest and just destroyed him, got very personal with it. Damian sold it really well. His eyes were basically wide open. It looked like he was really, really kind of out of it. But yeah, something I don't think many fans were like super excited to see for these guys, which is weird because they're both great and they both deserve good things. But like, especially Drew, I think a lot of us wanted him to have like a title match or something like that. But no, I got to admit, this week and last week's show really did drive home kind of the importance of their story and made a lot more sense. And again, we got a little bit more of that, especially with aggression towards the end. Casper says, like the Kevin Owens and Randy Orton, agree it was a fun segment. Yeah, good way to start the show, as I say. Always good to see Randy Orton get that appreciation. And I think Kevin Owens played into it quite well. If you want to see my reactions as these things actually happened and took place, you can go back and watch our watch along of this very show as well. If you're watching live, it's the earlier portion of this video itself on the stream, or if you're watching on demand, you can find it within the kind of archives of the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. But let's move on to the next kind of portion of the show. Again, quite a stacked one here tonight. Now that SmackDown's 3 hours, I mean, they got a lot going on, right? But the next thing we saw was essentially LA Knight run into Braun Strowman backstage, who said, look, to Braun, LA was saying, look, I'll look after you. I know what these guys are like, the bloodline. I'm here for you. And Braun was like, well, you know what? The winner of this match is coming after you. But, spoiler alert, we get to it later on. LA does come out to help Braun Strowman. We'll touch on that in a bit more detail later on. Then we saw a really, really, really good backstage promo, side-by-side, pre-taped, whatever you want to call it, between Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton. And I think they were fantastic, both of them. Like, they played off of why I think people, like, it's an obvious match to do, right? And part of it is, as Charlotte said, she's blonde and she does a moonsault. She reminds me of Charlotte Flair in a way. But she is the future. It feels like she's the modern kind of wrestler of this, you know, this era for the women's division. And Charlotte, not trying to say, you know, she's old lady Charlotte, kind of kick her out or anything like that, but she is coming towards the end of her being the new generation, or the current generation at least, you know, the 4 horsewomen and all that kind of stuff. So it's that kind of, not so much passing of the torch, because again, I think Charlotte's going to be around for quite some time, but we can see the parallels, I think. Tiffany also brought up that Charlotte was a big fan of Tiffany and supported her. Doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And basically said, look, the fans don't even want you around anymore. They're sick of you. Charlotte had a great line, which she said they're either wooing or booing. And I thought that was a great line. Especially considering, again, how a lot of us know, or at least feel about Charlotte, that maybe, you know, to me, she's one of the greatest of all time. She's certainly been shoved down our throats, and I don't think that's entirely her fault. So you got to bring her in a prominent position. And for me, before we get into the WrestleMania content, we'll talk about this more, of course, as WrestleMania gets closer. But for me, it should be a victory for Tiffany Stratton, kind of highlighting that she is this new era. And I don't think that damages Charlotte Flair either. Casper really enjoyed the fun first match as well. It says Braun and LA Knight backstage was also a fun segment. Charlotte and Tiffany was also fun as well. Yeah, I think they really, really, as I say, sold this match. Again, it's an obvious one, and I'm fine with it. I know some people are going to be looking at the Charlotte match being like, oh, really, again, in the big match, title match. If she wins it, I'll feel like that. But I don't know. Maybe I was going to say, I don't think she will win it very confidently, but you never know with WWE. Maybe she will. Then we got the match we kind of referred to earlier on. It was Jacob Fatu versus Braun Strowman. Now, this was a match that I think, again, could be a WrestleMania match, but no, they put it on SmackDown. Now, was it a good match? It was okay. It definitely weren't WrestleMania worthy. It was a match that was won by DQ, essentially by Braun Strowman. He won because Solo Sikoa got involved. And I've got to say, and I'll say this for all the matches tonight, none of them blew me away. None of them were as good as last week in Barcelona, and none of them were as good as, I think, what we saw on Raw as well. I still think out of the 3 shows so far on the European tour, Barcelona has been the best one. But it was decent. It was storyline progression. It's what you needed in that sense as well. So what we got essentially was Jacob getting slowly back into control, but Solo and Tangaloa, Tamatonga, I should say, Tangaloa is still out, were maybe not as convinced. And they jumped in. They attacked Braun Strowman, to which Jacob was very upset about. And you saw this in a backstage segment later on. Really, really angry, essentially, at Solo for this, and didn't hide that, by the way. So I do wonder where we're going to go with these guys. Is it going to get to a match between them two at WrestleMania? It feels too soon. The card is already looking stacked. Or is Jacob going to just find his way into this US title picture? Because I don't see next week being a win for Braun Strowman. I don't see him coming out of the O2 with the US title. Exploring Spoke, Jack says, fun show, but nothing mind-blowing. I agree. Yeah, again, like, it felt like if I was there in Bologna, I'd be happy. but I wouldn't feel like I saw anything important. And sometimes that's how it is for SmackDowns. That's, you know, that's just, we'll get you to the next week, essentially. It doesn't always have to be big stuff, but I do think the Barcelona show had a lot more going for it. And again, Raw as well. Even with the kind of confusion around some of the John Cena stuff, I still think it was quite enjoyable. Casper says Braun versus Jacob was just okay. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. And again, for the most part, I think this show was just okay when it came to the matches. There were fun things. There was storyline progression that we hoped we would see. And I think it was about time we bloody saw as well. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was kind of mind-blowing stuff or anything like that. Next up, though, we had Jade Cargill going up against Liv Morgan. Now, Liv Morgan, of course, is someone that's been, you know, in the fire line as far as kind of her being put out there as a, what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for? It's basically involved with the Jade Cargill attack. It wasn't her. It wasn't Raquel. As we've seen at Elimination Chamber, it was Naomi. Now, we're seeing these guys still get back into that feud because they're kind of, even though they're like, yeah, we didn't do it, but we still hate you, basically, is what we saw on SmackDown last week. Jade Cargill quite annoyed. This was her debut, not a debut, a return, I should say, since the injury. And again, another one where I was like, good match. It didn't blow me away, though. This is another one that ended in shenanigans. Quite fun kind of storytelling between the two of them. Quite, you know, fun as far as kind of the moves we saw, like great reversals of Oblivion and a lot of stuff kind of towards the end of the match. But really, it just wasn't amazing. It was, again, interrupted at the end by Naomi, who came out with a completely different look. I doubt she's coming out with the glow stuff anytime soon now. So maybe we should get another new theme song. I don't know. But yeah, I think this part of the show was all about progressing the story between Jade and Naomi. But the match was kind of just too long. Like, it was enjoyable, but I think it was just too long. Enjoyed this show, if there were some things within the show that you would have liked to have seen go differently. I mean, a big part of this, of course, is the fact that not only did Naomi get involved, but she basically cost Jade her first WWE loss. Like, this was the first time she'd been pinned, I should say, in WWE. So that's going to be something that they can play on. That's going to be something that Jade could be annoyed about if she's not already annoyed about the fact she was taken out by Naomi. And then Liv and Raquel end up being kind of super bad heels that take advantage of it as well. So it was a win-win situation, but I just think it was a match that went on maybe a little bit long. But again, it's nothing to do with them. I just think the whole show saw matches that went on just a little bit too long. Casper says Liv is great versus Jade Cargill, but okay, Naomi interfered. Yeah, again, it was a bit long, but I think they all did their job. They all did quite well. They come across in a good way overall, and it had the storyline progression that it needed. Yeah, good match. Now let's get back to what else we saw on this show. We also saw the match between Piper Niven and Zelina Vega. Now, this again was a one-on-one match, but you wouldn't know it because you had Chelsea Green and Alba Fire getting involved. It was one-on-one between the two already, and it looked quite a kind of mismatch, as Gary kept mentioning on our watch-along show earlier on. Piper Niven, of course, pretty much double the size of Zelina and looked like she was taking advantage of her for the most part of the match. And then Zelina started to kind of work her way back into it, but what do you know? The Secret Hervis, I think they're called it at the moment, got involved as well. And I'm enjoying what they're doing. But again, it was another match that was like, okay, again, some storyline progression. It felt like a very kind of middle of the road SmackDown for the most part. Like, last week we saw a lot of progress. This week, again, the tag thing is probably the most exciting. We spoke about that on the watch along. But yeah, for me, not the most exciting match-wise. Now, let's move into what we just mentioned a moment ago. The Street Profits decided to come out to the ring and basically give a thank you to the crowd. And then Los Garza came out with Santos Escobar and pretty much challenged them. And yeah, you would imagine that this is, again, leading towards this multi-tag team match, as we all expect to happen at WrestleMania. I was thinking 4 or 5 teams. Now it looks like maybe even 6, as people mentioned in the comments earlier on. Maybe even LWO gets added into this as well. Either way, looking forward to that. I think it'll be a great match. This was a good match as well. Probably, actually, maybe match of the night. Street Profits versus Los Garza was one of the most enjoyable matches of the night. It finished in the end with a huge frog splash, as always, from Montez Ford on top of Angel Garza to pick up the victory. But then again, we saw that backstage shenanigans later on between Pretty Deadly, DIY, and Motor City Machine Guns. Pretty Deadly did get involved in this match as well. They essentially made their way out to the ring to announce the fact that they were number 1 contenders and that Los Garza should step aside for them. But yeah, it looks like we are going to get this, as I say, 5 or 6 team match at WrestleMania. Then we get the main event. I say main event, it wasn't even a match, was it? But main event, you know what I'm saying. Casper says okay between Zelina and Piper, I should say. Yeah, a bit of a storyline progression. It seems to be all we got from this. Street Profits was a good match. Yeah, probably again the most enjoyable one for me. But we did wrap up the show with a 3-way promo between CM Punk, Roman Reigns, and Seth freaking Rollins. Exactly what we expected. But the one thing I think we did expect was Paul Heyman's reaction when CM Punk came out. It was very, very different, especially when you consider the way he reacted to CM Punk on Raw last week in the cage, where he basically cuddled him. Very different this time around. Seemed like he was upset that Punk was making his way to the ring. But I think that's because he's between a rock and a hard place, essentially, between Roman Reigns and CM Punk. He loves them both, and what's he do? It's going to be a bit of a love triangle, but at the moment, the triangle is strictly business. It's strictly in the ring itself between Seth Rollins as well. He's the 3rd member of what is bound to be one of the biggest matches of WrestleMania weekend. And again, we got a lot of hype and kind of progression here as far as making it obvious that this is going to be the match that we see between these 3 guys at WrestleMania. Again, the big talking point for me was the reaction of Paul Heyman, but it was your typical pull-apart brawl. Now, we've seen a lot of these recently. I know myself and Lucas spoke about this in depth on the Barcelona SmackDown stream about how these can be overdone at times. We've seen quite a lot of them recently. Punk and Seth did one. We saw one, of course, between Tiffany and Charlotte last week as well. Again, both fun. This one was good as well, but sometimes it's kind of too much of a good thing can be a problem as well. Casper says, I did like the segment between Roman, Seth, and CM Punk. It did have storyline progression as well. Yeah, we did see that they were kind of leading towards this match, as I say, and just kind of more, it was more stuff for the promo package. Like, I don't think there was much other than Punk's entrance that caused like a nuanced, like kind of response from Heyman that we might look back on. I don't think it's something they're even going to acknowledge here either. I think it's something that's going to be look back on if Punk does turn heel, or as was mentioned in our watch along stream, maybe it's Seth Rollins that turns and aligns with Paul Heyman. I do think Seth Rollins is due a heel turn, so that would make sense as well. So that would be quite interesting to see if it's Seth Rollins. It'd be a massive shock. Even though we're talking about it now, I'd still be like, I can't believe it. Wow, they actually did it. But that was on our watch along. Again, thank you so much to everyone that joined us for that, by the way. So you're a part of this stream if you're watching live. But if you're watching on demand, you can find it on the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. We were here for just over 3 hours, essentially breaking down everything that happened on SmackDown as it happened. So if you're yet to see the show, if you just tuned in now and you do want to watch, you can watch it alongside us. And again, a big thank you to everyone that joined us for us. We had some great comments throughout the night, and we've really appreciated all the support we've had throughout this European tour. Again, we're going to try and bring as much content as we can through the rest of it and on the road to WrestleMania fully as we get closer to it, as of course we are just under a month away now from WrestleMania itself. We also found out today that Slammies is going to be on WrestleMania week, so that'll be interesting to see how that squeezes into WrestleMania week. Again, I wasn't really a fan of this on the watch along when this was announced because I thought it was kind of shoehorned in, but the more I think about it, I'm pretty sure they did the same thing last year, but that's the point. Forgettable. And that's frustrating. You know, you could make something more out of the Slammies. Now, talking of making something more out of something, will we get more from John Cena on Raw? I don't think he'll have new music. I don't think he'll have a new look. But you can see my thoughts on the fact he didn't have those on the most recent edition of Monday Night Raw, which, of course, came from Brussels on this very channel. Also, you can see my reactions as it happened on this channel as well. Or you can also watch the full review of that show. Of course, a lot of movement when it comes to the IC title picture, as you can see there, Penta as well. Now, one thing I should mention before we do wrap up and get out of here is that we actually saw another vignette for number 4, whoever number 4 is, whatever this is. We saw it last week as well. Is it Aleister Black? I think so. And then we saw another one for, again, completely different this time, what looks like Rey Fenix. And again, we saw it last week, and rumors have been going around ever since. And there are a lot of stories out there at the moment. Apparently, Fightful have confirmed that Rey Fenix has signed with WWE. So you would imagine that is who we're referring to there. And again, a lot of speculation at the moment that it could be Aleister Black returning to WWE with the 4 vignette as well. So let's see where that goes. Casper says, what time is Monday Night Raw on Netflix? I believe in the UK, at least, I believe it's on at like 8 o'clock next week. So an hour later than it was today, essentially, wherever you are in the world watching this, guys. And if you're watching live on Netflix, you will be able to see it at that same time. Again, SmackDown's been a little bit delayed recently. Hey, you may be watching this in a few hours time from when I'm recording it, because again, SmackDown isn't live. It's on at 1 a.m. I believe, UK time at least. So we're about an hour and 40 minutes away from SmackDown starting in the States. But hey, we're in Europe. We've got the sneak preview. Thank you to everyone that's joined me on this watch along experience tonight, and also on the instant reaction review. Really enjoyed having you. It's been great to kind of dive into all the kind of happenings surrounding SmackDown tonight in Bologna, and get excited for the rest of the European tour, and also, of course, getting towards WrestleMania as well. I've been Scott. This has been a Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Drop your comments down below, even if you're watching in demand, because we'll get back to those in due course. Thank you for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week for Monday Night Raw.